partnership like we were discussing to help bring in events management specialists and people that have been involved with skills council development to support local talent development. So the strategic plan is really the starting place to help any country's industry develop a set of competency standards. In this case, we're looking at events management as a pilot project. And then all of these other pieces come within a project of this sort. And I mentioned capacity development. This slide just is a different way of describing that process. And what these building blocks show are that you can get the recognition for being good in a job or an occupation in different ways, through the formal academic path and informal, non-formal, experiential, the workplace road, which in many cases is the most solid one and the one that's respected. So one of the things we do in this plan, this strategic framework, is to show the links and to make sure it's, people say, should it be an industry-driven or academic-driven? And we say it should be both. And so this is a really key place to start thinking about competency standards. They really help with lifelong learning in different ways. They support the academic experience and the workplace experience. And as you see here, standards really help in a number of areas. They recognize experience, competencies. They help with improving the profile of tourism and business events in wider society. And they illustrate the pathways to opportunities. So there's a lot on that slide, but there's a lot to this model. We talked this morning about going from just beginning in a job all the way to becoming really solid managers and frontline people who know their jobs exceptionally well. And competency is competencies and competence are words that we use a lot and quite deliberately, because this really is a whole system that focuses on what people can do, not just what they know. And so you'll often see, especially in some emerging markets and developing countries, where all of the education and training for this industry is just classroom-based. Providing practical and theoretical experiences for students. So the process for developing standards, and we're talking two sets of standards here. We're talking about occupational standards and education standards. One builds on the other. And it has to be well informed if it's going to be meaningful to the industry. And so it's interesting to think about tourism as a profession or business events as a profession. So you start with occupational standards. They can help inform education programs. You can then ensure that your professional associations are doing the best job they can. You mentioned the three tourism associations right now. as an industry, by going through this process, you develop a code of ethics. And it's those professional standards. It ties in with licensing, you know, and that's the third. There's three kinds of standards. There's operating standards too. Job standards, competency, education standards, and operating standards. But that ties in. Certification is that recognition. One of the elements here that defines a real profession is program accreditation. What schools, what institutions have shown that they offer the right kind of programs. And then there's professional development conferences like this one, and the renewal of credentials. A good professional strategy has some autonomy. It's not driven just by the industry, or driven just by the government or the education. It's the industry deciding what works. And if it's done well, you can show where the partnerships are. You can say, you know what, our academy or our school, our council is working at the same levels and is partnered with similar organizations around the world. And what we've found is that most of these pieces are already in place, but they're usually fragmented or lack coherence. I discussed this morning, but it's worth going through it again. When you develop a set of standards, you really, to do a good job of collaborating with other partners, you have to really start from the place of the social context, the cultural work environment. And please, come on in. And that's particularly important. We need to look at the political environment, the economic environment, the regulatory structure, because sometimes that needs to be streamlined or modified so that our industry can be successful. This is so important today. The environmental aspects. Mentioned this morning that the technological side of our industry is changing rapidly. Look at these little creatures here. The historical context and globalization. And it's good to see in this conference people from many different countries sharing ideas. And everyone, the expression we use is a rising tide raises all boats. And I think that applies in some of the work that we try to do. So, technical and vocational education, and training, college level instruction, university programming is more effective when developed in what we call a tourism learning system model. But what often happens is that this work isn't coordinated very well at all, and there's duplication, and people not sure who's playing what role. So to turn this into color, you can create this coordinated system. And that's all it is. It's not a complicated concept, but it does take a lot of thinking. And one of the things we've learned is we did some research a number of years ago and determined what the key elements of a tourism learning system are. And these build right in to the framework that Mr. Monder is sharing with us. Some of these early slides are the ones he's prepared. But why do we need this for tourism education? Students need to know that their programs are relevant, that it's going to lead to jobs and careers. Industry needs to understand what is being taught at all the levels, and that it makes sense for today's changing industry, at frontline level, entry level, all the way to management. It's important for students, for learners, that their coursework is transferable from beginning levels through to a college certificate, diploma, degree, and usually that doesn't happen very well. It's taken us many years to make some changes there. And then for new programs, new education programs, by having standards, it allows them to know what's really important, what should be included. So I've got two sets of learning system requirements. One is that the government needs to be committed to a vision. This is what we've learned doing research, and this is what we've discovered ourselves in Western Canada. That the industry and the employers need to be committed to the vision. What do we want to be as an industry? Where do we want to go? There need to be incentives for employees, and there needs to be methods to encourage employers. Because not all employers see training as an investment. Some employers see training as a cost and cutting corners. But that's important. So those are the first 4 requirements of a learning system, and there's 5 others. And maybe, I think number 5 should probably be number 1, or number 9. But this is the most important one, we think. A single coordinating agency that is respected by and recognized by all the stakeholders. Education and training standards, practical and theoretical training at all levels. So students studying at a 4-year university degree level should also have some practical training and experiences built in. And many programs do, but some don't do it as well as they could. The program should be laddered, they should be flexible modules, modular delivery, and then the marketing of all these programs to tourism employers. And I'll give you just a short, really quick case study. This is how we've learned this. So we started in Western, this is just in the province of British Columbia, about 4.5 million people. So it's fairly small, but we have about 25 public colleges and universities and probably 40 or 50 private training institutions. So you can't, I'm just going to describe what's in those boxes. We started by creating a set of core curriculum for the different kinds of tourism programs. And they're at the bottom: hospitality, diploma, and degree, 2-year diploma, 4-year degree. These were already established, so we worked with them to refresh their curriculum based on standards. Tourism management, adventure tourism, culinary arts, and we do a lot of work with Aboriginal tourism as a subset. But you can see all the groups that were involved. We need our coordinating agency. I used to work as the director of programming for the Pacific Rim Institute of Tourism, and then more recently with an organization called Link BC, the Tourism and Hospitality Education Network. So there isn't one moved to the other. I just retired from that organization last year. But we work pulling all these groups together. And that takes a bit of time. But people, we had very little resistance. The resistance came initially from some of the schools. And they said, no, we're better than this school down here. Or this university is better than that one, our part of this. And we just steadily brought people together and said, you know what, if you're going to be quality providers, you really need to come together to decide what is common core education standards based on industry standards. And now these schools, it takes time, they're very, very supportive, and they see the benefits. So this is a larger version of this. This was a document for career guidance. This is a document we prepared for high school students, and there's a lot of information here, but we turned this into lessons. See, the first circle is all the certificate and degree programs at public institutions at the college level. This one is the degree programs, and you can see before Vancouver Island University was there, it used to be in Malaspina, that was one of the old ones, that's where you studied, and then the private institutions. Mm-hmm. And so all of these groups work together on common curriculum. On the left, we have secondary school tourism career programs. We only had a couple of graduate level programs, They weren't as involved. And at the bottom, we showed all the industry occupational standards. At the top, those green, you can just see the green lines there. Those are all different jobs in the industry. So if I were to do this poster again, I don't know what I would do, but I would do it a little differently because there's too much information. But you can see it's all there on one page. So that's a bit of a case study. And a similar approach is going to assist in strengthening the kingdom's tourism and MICE workforce. I would emphasize MICE because this is the invitation we had for the forum here. So that all is career guidance. This is information about how the industry fits together and where the career options. So the training courses, again, informed by the standards. You can see the criteria. There's a quality assurance process in making sure that short-term courses for industry are as best they can be, including developing the faculty. I use instructors there as maybe a better word. And that would be of interest in your institution. And making sure the learning practices are current and effective. There's different kinds of on-the-job and workplace approaches. Online programs, working with your employees and constant skill, repetition, and practice. One of the things that we try to do is create mentoring programs, which work well. Some of this is traditional training, some of it is more unique, group-based workshops, and we put a lot of emphasis on making sure that trainers and instructors and professors, that's outside of industry training, are well developed. Coaching is a really important skill for workplace instructors. When we look at, and I skipped over the sector certifications because I'm going to touch on how that's important to university degrees, but in order to develop good, and I'd say college or university degrees, you really need to do what we found. You had to do a good inventory and analysis of what's being taught today, what else is out there, what are the best programs. You need to get that educator input first, not industry input first with the education community. This is all about building ownership. Then industry gets involved too, and this is a very detailed process. All of our curriculum guides are quite detailed, and industry leaders will say, yes, this is good, no, this is not, this needs to be strengthened, this one needs to be taken out. Then we look at program articulations, the linkages, the laddering, one program connecting to the next. And I have one slide to show you what's involved with that. There's a fifth one. Where did it go? Anyway. And the fifth one was actually the design of the programs and the development of the materials that are effective. So this is what this has resulted in across Canada in terms of a credit transfer system amongst the academic institutions. And it's been quite successful. We have had the initial discussions with SECB and TECML and others about how the development of stronger curricula can happen here in Saudi Arabia, along with opportunities to partner with schools that we have relationships with elsewhere that are world specialists in events management, tourism marketing. There's other good relationships you probably already have that can be built on too, but these are some of the discussions we're having now. Importantly for the events sector, and remember this is a demonstration project, or potentially that, it's building on the international competency standards that have just been recently developed. This is a first effort internationally to bring all the leaders and industry associations for events together to say, what does it take to be really good in our field? We have them for hotel manager as well, and food and beverage manager. Those are international. But we have many, many other standards that are just national. But to make it a little complicated, but it helps to reinforce this, that these are all based on international standards, setting standards, ISO. These are what need to be included in your exams. These are all the steps, and so these have been followed. So I've mentioned how important it is for standards to consider cultural diversity in the work environment. The key emphasis here is putting this message in a different way, is really supporting the mobility of learners, defining what is expected of a competent learner, following a really rigorous process so that people can't say, where did those standards come from? You can say, this is how they were developed, and they stand up to scrutiny. They're maintained within an appropriate central body or administrative structure that has respect. In Canada, it's the Skills Council that has government funding support, and it's accessible. Remember those building blocks? You can access this from different ways. It's not completely restricted that way. So the standards, I'm going to go through these a little quicker now, have been a really successful accomplishment by all those countries. And they cover in great detail many of the job tasks involved in event management work. And these are available in many other sectors too. And I took this, I just put this in last night. Sometimes just seeing a cover doesn't do it much justice, but you can see there's 100 pages of very detailed descriptions of all the elements in running a successful business event, including site management and event design, the areas that you know very well. But this is what colleagues around the world have put together. So it's funny, I should put this into a PDF because the typeface has changed with this. But it's using this certification, the CEMP, is something that can be built into the university or college program. People can work towards it. A few more slides just to finish off. When I mentioned one of the building blocks is making sure that the schools work together on developing quality programming, and that can be proven by an accreditation process, not certification, but accrediting the program. And this qualification framework, I showed you the larger version this morning, really shows what kind of quality educational deliverer is needed to get that certification or that accreditation. How do they measure success for students? What kind of research and innovation do they demonstrate? How do they help their faculty become stronger? And that, like most accreditation programs, is a very strong, rigorous process that requires renewal. And one of the things that we have benefited from as we've developed this work is partnerships globally that we'd be happy to share with you there. There are many colleges and institutes and universities in Canada that would be interested, I think, in developing an academic partnership. And we have a relationship with those. This is what I mentioned before. If you're looking at building, I'm just going to go through these quickly, a way of showing how programs link. You have three major areas, we call it discovery, at the meetings between the programs, and to show that, this is for the accreditation process and transfer, to show that the school is offering quality programming with the right kind of content, and then you end up with an agreement to show how those graduates and the students end up with the transfer arrangement. It's very much built on the principles of collaboration and focusing on the learner, on serving the industry in the most effective way. The last area I'll show you is a tool that could help colleagues here in Saudi Arabia. In the last couple of years, the Council has worked with all the education institutions in Canada that are involved in tourism, public and private, and they've developed a resource guide. And it's like the best practices and the lessons learned. And you can see some of the, and this is a long document, I think it's about 160 pages, but it's well put together. And it's all about why quality assurance is important for tourism development, developing partnerships, working on promoting programs. Some schools still find it challenging to get the word out. And then there's a set of checklists in terms of how to run an industry advisory committees and how to make sure faculty are as strong as possible, some successful learning practices. So this document is something that could be adapted or made available. And these are the key areas for undergraduate programs in tourism. Making sure that the schools have clear goals about where they want to go and what their role is for serving the industry as well as students. Curriculum and instruction should be at top levels. We talked a bit about that. What resources they have, what kind of campus facilities and computer labs, and these days, what kind of online resources do students have. And I would add to that, I think there's one piece missing here, it's the industry connection, the linkage in the actual program, and I think it's in the document. Faculty development and opportunities for faculty to go back into the industry when they're professors and actually work at a conference like this. We've been doing that with some success in some schools. How to measure student achievement, and then the management of your program. So all of these factors go into building good programs. And this is another slide that just helps to make that a little clearer in terms of how each course outline ties into a full program and the program objectives. I don't want to bore you with all the details here, but you can see there's a process with a number of steps clearly defined within it. So for events management, for example, what we've done with all that theory is actually develop learning outcomes for this one particular job area, or jobs actually in the events management area. And so you can see this, they go into great detail, but these can be used effectively to develop learning materials and instructional materials. So you've got a very solid base to build from. The learning outcomes are slightly different, and the wording is different in the competency standards. This basically says this is what you will know and be able to do when you finish. So in summary, the benefits of a tourism learning system approach really will help create stronger events curriculum. Remember, we're using this just as a sample, as a pilot. It will mean that programs are aligned to competency standard, that programs will be laddered or linked or articulated at all levels, that you would, hopefully with the process, you will end up with increased government and industry support for the programs that serve your sector. You'll end up with more Saudi students choosing events management, but you can substitute events management for hospitality careers or tourism or heritage sites, and cultural tourism management. And really, it's a stronger MICE industry, it's a stronger business events industry, but more importantly, with our audience here, a stronger tourism industry. So we just identified a few areas where there's possibility to work together, developing curriculum, maintaining information on websites for students, developing career awareness material. One of the things that we just started to do, we started late, is putting a module, a student module in all the programs about the value of credentials. And if there's interest, there's already international certification programs that can be adapted to Saudi and built into your curriculum, and encouraging additional partnerships with good school. And there's a few more areas here. This is the last slide. An area that our council specializes in is tourism labor market research. And we can work with colleagues here to help get a better picture of who is in the industry, what people think of the industry, what the opportunities and challenges are from having that background information. And we have a specialist, his name is Scott Meese. He's known globally as one of the best tourism researchers involved. So he would be very pleased to discuss that with you. And I think the second last bullet, if there's an opportunity to work on joint projects, the council has good relationships with